I didn't know this, Payne. You grew up with Pat?
No. We played AAU together, and I was the only person on the team north of Indianapolis. So I would always drive the 2 hours from Muncie to Bloomington, and then eventually I just stayed there. So I stayed at Pat's house with his mom, and his parents had divorced by then. So Coach Knight obviously wasn't there, but he was obviously around. So I grew up a diehard Indiana fan. My whole family went to Indiana. My grandfather, my grandmother, my uncle, my dad, my brother, all on my dad's side went. My cousin, all went to Indiana. So we grew up like we were Indiana fans. My dad went in 76 and 81 to Philadelphia for the Final Four. He took me in 87 to Louisiana when they beat Syracuse. He went to the Rose Bowl when last time Indiana went to the Rose Bowl, they play O.J. Simpson and USC. So like my dad was obviously an Indiana grad, got his judicial degree from Indiana. So Bob Knight just would have offered me. It just would have been, over. And I just would have sat down there at the end of the bench and kept fouls and timeouts during the games. But it was great that he didn't offer me. And he did recruit me because I would have went there and I wasn't better than those guards. And so it really worked to my advantage. I waited till the spring. But no, I had Pat and I were friends. Tim Knight coached our team. And so it was an interesting summer playing AAU basketball there, but also kind of being around Assembly Hall a little bit. I played play pickup. And, the one story I always tell, and Rob has heard me tell this story, is, you can talk and want to do something, but then once you're kind of around somebody, like when Coach Katie started recruiting me, like I was just floored how nice he was. Because the only thing I saw him was him going crazy in games, like losing his mind. Like in 87, 88, that time period, like they won Big Ten championships, and I'd watch Purdue. And I was an Indiana fan, so I rooted against Purdue. I hated Purdue. And so I was down there and I was playing, and we were kind of circling the wagons about our summer. And I was down in the cave at Indiana, and Coach Knight's and their cave was like where their couches and stuff are, where they watch film, the showers, just kind of the coach's room. And he was there, and we walk in, and Pat says, come in here. My dad wants to see me. Well, we'll talk to him. I'm like, oh man. And I'm scared. Like, I'm like, I don't want to be around. Like, but I want to go there. And he hasn't offered me, but he's called me a couple times on the phone. Like Coach Knight had called me. One time he called me at 7:30 in the morning, and he just says, well, you don't seem like you're too interested. And I just said, well, Coach, for the first couple minutes, I didn't realize it was you. I kind of thought it was a prank. Like he's going to really Bob Knight's really going to call me. And it's like, no, it's me, listen up. I'm like, oh my goodness, this is way to go. Like you've really made a great impression here. You more or less said it was one of your buddies pulling a prank. So now we're in this cave and we're sitting there and he's talking. And the whole reason was Pat wanted his dad to call Howard Garfunkel to get us both into 5-star, but to have us rooming together. And like why he had to do that or how the details, I'm not sure. It's, over 30 years ago. And so they get on the phone, and you can only hear Coach Knight on the phone because he's talking to Howard Garfunkel. And Howard Garfunkel puts him on hold. All right. And you can see how this is going to go. And he was now flipping it back on him. He hangs up on him. So then Howard Garfunkel calls him back. He hangs up on him again. But each time he was asking him, hey, is that Ronald Reagan that was on the other end of the phone? He says, if it's Ronald Reagan, then I'm cool. Like, you should take the president's call. But if it's anybody other than Ronald Reagan, like, why are you putting me on hold? And so, but you can only hear what Coach Knight was saying. And I'm just sitting there like, oh, man, like, this isn't going to go good. Because we still got to get to the conversation about getting us into 5-star. And my dad was like, hey, I know Pat and his dad are going to help, get this going. He goes, but we need to, you need to get in there. And so kind of a long story short, Pat just kind of turns and just says to his dad after, he goes, hey, we want to get in this or whatever. And he goes Painter came here and he wants, and Coach Knight quickly said, I don't give a damn what Painter wants. And I was like, oh man. I just want to excavate the floor and jump in. Where can I hide? Where can I go? And I'm scared anyways. Right. And so and he sat there, and then they kind of talked about a couple different things, and it kind of cooler heads prevailed. And we ended up not going because Pat and I ended up playing a lot more on our AAU team and just kind of the exposure there. And I think Pat did end up going. I didn't go. I was playing and so I don't know how it all actually happened, but that was that was always it was kind of a neat summer, but it was also a learning experience too.
You stay in touch with Pat?
Yeah, not as much as like when we like in college, like when he was coaching in college and I was, we cross paths and stuff like that. But we text, and actually his mom texts me all the time.
Really?
So his mom stayed in contact, and she was great. Like, you think about like putting somebody up for a whole summer, and she was a great lady.
Yeah, Pat's nuts. My only Bob Knight. Well, I had a couple Bob Knight stories, but my favorite one was, I don't remember how we ended up, but we ended up going to the Carnegie Deli. There were about 5 of us after a game in New York City one night that he was commentating. It had to be 10, 12 years ago. And I was young, kind of broke into the business probably a few years earlier. And we go, and I'm sitting right across from him. It's him, and I'm right across from him. We're there for at least an hour, probably an hour and a half. And Garf was there too. Gary Parrish was there. I was there, and probably one other person, maybe. It might have been Slice. Might have been Barry Rorson.
Mm-hmm.
And literally, I'm not kidding, an hour and a half, the dude never even looked at me. Didn't say anything, never even looked at me. And I'm right across from him. It was like I was a fucking ghost. Never even looked at me. And I tried, I might have tried to make small talk with him at one point and then realized no, it ain't happening. So
yeah, we went one time and they reached out to Pat when I was there in the same summer, and they said, your dad's looking for you. And so we go and find him on the golf course. So we get a cart and we go out to whatever hole, and he's out there. And the same thing, and he's warming up, hit a ball, and he's starting to talk to Pat about. And I'm just sitting over there once again, I'm just one man, don't get in the fray here, just sit here, and I'm not trying to get eye contact with anybody and I don't remember who's with him. Who's golfing, but then he turns to me and he says, when you go baseline and you drive and you make that pass over your shoulder and you flip that ball in your shoulder when you drive baseline, I go, yeah. And he goes, you need to make a rectal deposit with that. And I go, okay. And he goes, do you know what that means? I said, yes, sir. I 100% I know what that means. And I just was like that. I've never heard somebody use that terminology before then. I've never heard someone use that terminology since, but I got the point. And then what's ironic is when I got to Purdue, so then I play my senior in high school. Obviously I sign at Purdue and go there. And Coach Katie talks about, if you drive the ball on the base, you better score or you're going to get stuck down there. He goes, stay off the base unless you got the game to score on the base. And I would go to the baseline and just get myself in trouble. And just and that would just resonate with me. Hey, Coach Knight was trying to help me, and he was very direct about it.
The rectal deposit. That's what I'm gonna call it. With
real quick, Jeff. Coach, am I remembering this right? When we were playing, I want to say at Minnesota, Coach Knight called the game.
Yes.
Am I remembering this correctly? That he told you at shoot around or practice that if he was coaching, he would have all of our good players. Did he say that to you?
What he said was, You have taken the guys that I would have taken.
So it wasn't like if I was coaching, I would have all of your players.
No.
It wasn't like that. Okay. I knew he said something
this is a great story, and I know we've kind of gotten into this trilogy of Coach Knight here, but he just simply said, "You're smart." He goes, "You've done a good job. You've taken smart players that have some deficiencies, but their deficiencies aren't their skill level or their IQ or their competitive spirit." He goes, and that's really all that matters. He goes, people look at guys and they rank them. He goes, it's not track and field. It's basketball. You got to, and so he just rambled about it forever with me. And it just made a whole lot of sense. And then he was at the Final Four, and it wasn't when we had saw him the time that you got that award at the Final Four. It was a year or two after. And it was kind of in the same setting where I was in the back of I don't know what I was doing. I don't know if I was coaching one of those Reese All-Star deals or whatever the heck they were doing. I was doing something for the NABC, but I was just around on one of those days where they don't play a game. And he comes up and smacks me on my back and hits me. I don't see him coming. And he just looked at me and he scared me. And I looked around and he goes, "Hey, what'd I tell you about not taking guys that were intelligent?" Said, "You got away from that, didn't you?" And then didn't wait for my response and just moseyed on but it was that was his way of hey man, you've taken some guys, you've taken Etwan Moore and Jawan Johnson and Rob Hummel and Chris Kramer and like, you know, guys that know the game and like, you know, and now you've turned around and taken more of an athletic guy and you've gotten away from some of those other things. Which I you know, I mean, you don't have time to argue with the man about it, but it's like recruiting isn't picking also, you know what I mean? Like, it's not like where would I have gone if you didn't come to Purdue? Like I got to go get somebody else. And that plan definitely wasn't going to be as good as the plan that had you involved in it. And so like, sometimes people don't understand that. They look at you like, what are you doing? You're like, well, like, you know, you try to get like, we all wanted Derrick Rose, like, you know, but he's only going to go to one school. But you got to realistically be able to recruit people. Like, we can't get Derrick Rose, and I understand that. So I'm not going to waste time there. But there's people you have a chance to get that you don't get. But it was still something that resonates with me because he's dead on. He's right. He's right, because he would take some guys that would fit into roles, and that's something that I've always tried to do. Now, sometimes guys don't like that. But that's what leads to winning. And I always talk about the NBA and like, you know, like I really understand the NBA. I've never been in the NBA, but I do sit there and watch the guys that can accept their roles and play and help their teams win. And they help that organization, but they also help themselves. And like, sometimes guys don't understand that about that. But I've tried from a recruiting thing of saying like, why can't we get the best shooter in the Midwest? You know, why can't we get guys that understand the game? Like we like Chris Kramer, like is still playing basketball. It's amazing. You know, to me, that's amazing. But, you know, he understands how to play. He's competitive. Like what else? Like, sure, you want to be a little bit better in other areas, like so you can get to that elite level, but you're still a really, really good pro. And you've done.
He's had an amazing career.
Amazing career. But he's got
totally
a lot of things that people don't look at sometimes when evaluating. Like he has a good makeup. He's like you can affect the game without scoring, even though you scored more.